So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray.
Soil lovers, Regen Ray here, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. Today, I'm very excited to go really deep into the world of permaculture. We are joined by a very special guest who's currently in Victoria from Permaculture Education Institute. Morag Gamble, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be here and lovely to be with everyone too.
Excellent. Today, we're going to cover a lot of things around permaculture and soil, but for those listeners who maybe have been living under a rock very close to the earth, tell them a little bit about who you are and how you fit in this world of permaculture.
I've been living in a permaculture eco-village for about a quarter of a century now. That shows my age. As a young teenager, I was absolutely passionate about exploring ways that we can live that were regenerative. And at that time, we were calling them sustainable. And I knew in my head what that meant until I went and volunteered in this place called Ladakh over the other side of the Himalayas. Everything came from the earth and went back to the earth. And it was about tending to this fragile layer of soil that they'd cultivated from glacial meltwaters and returning, human you back to the soil, that I got it. I really got it, that it was tending and caring to the soil using these regenerative practices. And I came back to Australia and I went, well, how are we supposed to do that here in our contemporary society? And permaculture was the closest way that I could find to actually look at the principles of nature and the practices of living lightly on the earth in a way that made sense and was shareable. And so I've dedicated my life to permaculture because I feel that's something very, well, like I said, very shareable. It's something that just makes sense. It's doable by anyone everywhere. I work a lot with refugee youth and in East African refugee camps. They can do it there. I work with people on rooftops in New York and they can do it there. And kids in schools, they can do it there. I just think finding ways that we can share loving the soil, loving the planet, loving community, to me, it fills my cup. It feels like it's a way to contribute to the well-being of society and the planet. And it's a very simple way of approaching taking on the designing of how we're to live. That's kind of the heart of it. So I set up the Permaculture Education Institute as a core way of teaching permaculture teachers, but I've also been involved in setting up things like the Perma Youth and Northeast Street City Farm and city farms around the world and Australian City Farms and Community Gardens Network and the Ethos Foundation, which is a registered permaculture charity. And spend my days dreaming and working on ways to contribute to this.
Yeah, I love that. And I can see that just from, your website and, hanging out with you via osmosis through lots of other channels. You got YouTube, you got an online course, you've got blogs and, being a part of a lot of, discussions and Zoom calls, especially during COVID. I saw your face popping up in a lot of, the regenerative kind of movement that was happening. How do you fit it all in? That was like one of my biggest questions. Like, have you got clones? Like, how are you everywhere? So
I don't know, just every day, just one step after the other. And I think, I don't know, I always just say yes because it feels like the right thing to do. And I feel somehow that this capacity through, like you're saying, with YouTube, with blogs, with social media, with podcasts, all this content, each day, if you create something else, it just keeps adding to the body of work. And it just gradually, day by day, builds. And so if we just keep on showing up, it just keeps rippling out there. And I think this is one of the key things of being consistent, isn't it? Like if you are consistently caring for something or caring about something, it builds momentum quite rapidly.
Yeah. And it also is a little bit easier when it's something that you're so passionate about and absolutely love and it's connected to your heart and your soul. It doesn't feel like you're creating content. You're just speaking your truth, so that's probably makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah. And well, as a podcast host, I love podcasting. I love being in conversation with people and, getting to, have conversations with amazing people every week and have the chance to share those out. So, it's fun, it's nourishing, it's uplifting, being in a space where you can host really interesting conversations with people around the world, I can't imagine anything much better to be doing. Life, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you mentioned that you've lived a quarter of a century in an eco village. Can you elaborate a little bit more for those who maybe don't know what that means, and yeah, share a little bit of a life of the day that you live?
Well, I live in a place called Crystal Waters Permaculture Village. It's on Gubbi Gubbi country in southeast Queensland, just outside of a little lovely town called Maleny. Now, Maleny, I just start there because Maleny is maybe an interesting place that not many people really know about, because I don't think it's been written about. It's something that I would like to write about. Maleny was a dying rural town, essentially, that has been transformed into this thriving rural village using cooperatives. So there's food cooperatives and a local community bank and artist cooperatives, a cooperative club, a whole range of different projects. And within that too were a whole lot of different communities that were forming land-based cooperatives. So Crystal Waters at its heart began as a cooperative housing project, a cooperative community. Over the years, it changed its structure into a permaculture village with basically a community title situation. So within 650 acres, there are 250 people roughly living of all ages and about, last count, 16 nationalities. And so I have an acre within that, and I have an acre freehold. And so there's 86% of the land is common land. So basically it's about living in the commons. No fences, no cats and dogs. We have a policy of, pedestrians and wildlife have right of way on the streets. We share the common land, and so that's sharing the farmland as well. I'm part of a dairy collective, so once every fortnight it's my turn with my family to go down and milk, and then from that we make the cheeses and the yogurts, and we have 50% of the land is reforested, so helping to regenerate the landscape and to help rehydrate the landscape. There's 17 lakes and dams, and some of them are beautiful swimming dams where we relax in. I built a hand-built solar-powered home, and this is also where the headquarters of the Permaculture Education Institute is in one of the structures there, surrounded by permaculture food forests. I spent a lot of time as I was developing up our place to really create robust, resilient food systems that could withstand the droughts and the floods that we get up there. And I homeschool my kids too. So if we don't teach about permaculture for them, but they are totally immersed in permaculture every day. And so I have a 15-year-old son who eats quite a lot. So we've got quite a few chickens. And if he's hungry, I'll say, all right, there's the garden, there's the chickens. And I don't even have to say anymore. I just see him walking up past the office, and he's up to the chickens and grabs some eggs and goes down, gets some greens and cooks himself up a frittata, and voila, I just think and one day, I didn't think he cared about the chickens. And one day he came up to me and said, Mum, I think you might need to get some more grit for the chooks, because I think, the eggs wasn't quite as hard today. And I'm so happy. Like those little noticings, and really being in tune with it. I thought, if you have that sensibility and you can grow up surrounded by that, that's a gift that I can give as a mother, I reckon.
Absolutely. No, this sounds like a magical place to live, and such good. And, as you were speaking, it brought back a lot of memories of my childhood. It wasn't so much permaculture, but the Italian way of having a backyard in suburbia, what, David Holgram would call retro suburbia these days. But that was kind of my childhood, where we had chickens in the back fence or the laneway, and there's, fig trees creating shade, and, there's grapevines growing along the buildings that turns into wine at the end of the season, and, growing tomatoes to make passata and salami making day. And they're all felt like chores when I was younger, and like you're saying, like now that I'm a bit more mature and wiser, I guess I'm like really appreciative that was my childhood, and I got to grow up, connected to those systems. Because as you said with your son, it's the many parts that make up the whole. Why, being that curious to go, why is the egg feeling softer today, and kind of reverse engineering that to go, we need to give the chickens more grit, and where would they get that naturally, and what's that kind of system at work that creates more of a probably problem solving brain than find the answer of X on this algebra quiz.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And I hear that a lot too from, like I said before, I work a lot with young people in East Africa, and there is that sense that farming is a chore. It's something that you're trying to move away from still. And so it's really an interesting dynamic, isn't it? That shifting this relationship with food, shifting the relationship with the soil, is very tied up in our ideas about what is a good life, what is a rich life, and we're seeing it being unpicked and reconfigured here in Australia, for example. But I still think in many countries, as particularly in the so-called developing countries, that there's a lot of perception shift that still is going on around what is farming and what is the value of being a farmer and what is the value of soil and how do we actually move forward. So I think there's a war on soil as there is a war on the planet at the moment.
Yeah. And so you've just mentioned about the value of soil. What, in your opinion, is the value of soil? Like, obviously this is a podcast that's dedicated to soil, and our community, the soil lovers, are keen to do their part in whatever it is to better educate themselves around soil. I call it the power of soil. I feel like it is literally the most powerful asset we have on the planet, but the least researched and looked at and understood. And it's right under our feet because we're too busy at deep oceans and Mars and the moon. So in your opinion, and the years and decades of knowledge that you've got, like, what does soil and the value of soil mean to you?
Oh, it's everything. It's absolutely everything. It's the context for life. Soil is life. It's the foundation for all life on this planet. And I think there's this, as you said, it's this unseen world, but it's tending to that unseen and tending to the richness and the fertility of that unseen world is what is going to help life to thrive and continue to thrive on this planet. And so our love of soil and our love of nourishing the soil is what's going to ensure that we are able to continue to live on this planet and live well on this planet. So I think it's the love of soil. There's something that every day when I go out in my garden, the best thing is for me is to go out just barefoot. I garden barefooted and barehanded because something about feeling how the soil's feeling today, I can't tell unless I get a sense of it through my feet. Like, is it feeling warm and soft, or is it feeling, hard and dry? The feeling of how the soil is. And then that gives me an indicator as kind of the gardening or the soiling, how to actually respond. And the response becomes something that's it's a very sensory experience that, my hands and my feet as my tools of how I sense it, the sense of relationship. So I love going out there and engaging with the soil. It's a relationship. It's not something that I'm in control of. I'm in relationship with the soil. And the more that I tend and care for the soil that I'm responsible for, it becomes this reciprocal relationship. The more I tend and care for the soil, the more that the soil nourishes us and our family, and I'm able to, create abundance that I can give out even further.
I love that connectivity to the soil and doing it. The catchphrase is to get outside and get your hands dirty. And that's the whole point of the podcast is, to be connected. And, a lot of the presentations I do, I say your first line of defense is your 5 senses. You got them already. What does this look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? And if you game enough, and you feel safe, what does it taste like? And, sight and, all our 5 senses is our first line of defense. And yet we've created, you go to garden, you put gloves on and you got to wear safety boots and all these like things under the red tape of the world that we've created to disconnect us even more from feeling it and nurturing it. And your response, you've created a feedback loop. The soil feels warmer today. What does that mean? And what can I do differently? The compost is that, it's steaming, and it's maybe getting too hot, and being just really aware about it, because you can see it. You don't need all these tools and gadgets and formulas to use your intuition sometimes.
So I think there's a lot of fear too, because on the YouTube that I share on our Permaculture Live, I'm out there barefooted, barehanded, and some of the responses that I get are, how could you possibly be barefooted in the garden? Don't you know you'll get some dreadful disease? A lot of very caring people trying to give me advice that I should actually put shoes on because I'm going to die if I don't. And there's a lot of fear attached to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all well intended, but yeah. Yeah. But I think that's because, again, the way that most people are raised is like, it's dirty, it's dirt, it's germy. You got to wash your hands, and you got to like sanitize and clean and wash your hands before you eat. And, I'm often in community gardens, and I'll be the one who doesn't wear gloves. I'm like, no gloves, all good. And then I'm like, unfortunately, sometimes I'm forced by the OH&S protocols, and it's like, it's difficult. But then even, get to lunch, you just kind of, roughly wipe them and you eat the sandwich. And, for me, I'm like, that's just the biome of the local economy going into me. You know what I mean? But not everyone sees the world through that lens. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit also in terms of the food, because it's just come out of my garden right in front of me or wherever I'm working. And it's just, I don't disinfect it or do anything. It's just straight out of the garden, straight into the salad and straight in my mouth. And that's, I very rarely get sick. I can't remember the last time I was sick.
Yeah. Surprise. Yeah, they agree. And that's how I grew up in the backyard garden as well. When grandparents were like, pick the fig off the tree, peel it and eat it, and sometimes not even peel it, just eat it with the skin, because that's where some of the flavor is. Yeah.
The vitality that you get out of food, that is just straight from the garden. I think there's an aliveness in it that transfers. And I don't have any evidence for that, but it feels like that. And I'm pretty sure that there are scientific reports that show that, but I can't point to them right now, sorry.
Yeah, Bionutrient Institute does some, and also Zach Bush talks about it a lot too, where it's like the biome on a plant starts deteriorating the minute it's picked off the tree, and then by the time it's gassed and trucked and cold storaged and brought to a shelf in the supermarket, there's not really much left at it from a nutritional point of view,
No.
So, yeah, off the tree and into the mouth is probably the most connected we can get. Hey there, soil lovers, Regen Ray here, and I'm about to head to another event hosted by Nutrisoil, and I want you to come along with me. Why? Because it's all about worms. That's right, it is the Wormfest 2024 hosted by Nutrisoil at their head office, and it's right in the middle of Victoria and New South Wales border, so you've got no reason not to be there, because we're going to meet halfway and we are going to celebrate worm and all biological solutions. This is a 2-day event going Thursday the 21st of March and Friday the 22nd of March, and it also includes a dinner. So there's a package there for everyone, whether you can make one day, both days, or even come to the dinner. I'm going to be hanging out there. I'm going to be roaming around, taking some videos, taking some photos, getting to meet everyone who's getting geeky with worms. So make sure that you get on down. It is $220 for the 2-day pass and the dinner. Now, I think that is extremely great value for money, and there are a bucket loads of guest speakers. So head over to nutrisoil.au. There's the big Wormfest banner. You won't miss it. Follow the links also around this video and on this podcast, because we're going to be really rubbing shoulders with some amazing people and hanging out and having a yarn, and also have a bite to eat some nutrient-dense food that's locally sourced and grown. It is going to be an amazing event, and if soil biology has been something that's been on your mind, then this is the event to really come to and meet amazing case studies, meet the creators of the Nutrisoil product, farmers that have been using the product. I will be there doing some roaming interviews, taking some photos, and some other Soil Connect clients will also be there. So this is going to be a real big party and a celebration to worms. So I hope to see you there. That's nutrisoil.au. Check out the website, get your tickets, and I'll see you at Wormfest, where we're really going to dig deep and get our hands dirty. On that note, back to the show. You've spent a lot of time with people in the right mindset that are very connected to earth and doing permaculture. You're in the eco village. how important is it, even in like virtual spaces, to be around people on the same wavelength and just, kind of learning from osmosis? Because we have a lot of people these days who are in apartments, they don't have access to land, and they feel like that's the reason why they can't practice permaculture, because they don't have land. I've been someone who's been in that position, and I practiced permaculture principles in an apartment, and it was kind of game changer during COVID. But from your experience, how important is it just being in, say, like virtual rooms or listening to podcasts around permaculture to get that kind of osmosis learning and feeling?
I think it's absolutely essential to surround yourself by ideas and conversations and network of support that is filling your cup and that is having the deeper conversations about what it means to live well on this planet, what it means to care for country, what it means to care for community, what it means to be in a reciprocal relationship. All of these things are absolutely essential to the well-being of all of us in terms of like our head, heart, our hands, and our hope. I think if we don't surround ourselves with that, we can sometimes find ourselves feeling quite alone, or maybe like we're at odds with what we hear is going on, because traditional media paints one particular picture, whereas there is this whole other world that exists. And sometimes there's an overlap, but I feel somehow there's different worlds that are happening now. I use the metaphor of soil to kind of explain how important this is, because sometimes it feels like you're doing something different or a little bit odd, or sometimes a bit hippie. I there's all these different words to kind of marginalize it. But believe me, like I've traveled around the world working in all of this for my entire life, and it doesn't matter, wherever you scratch the surface, you'll find people who care about this stuff. And you find people who are doing it in every corner of the planet. And there's this, my theory of change is that there's this mycelial network that's underneath the soil. So it's this unseen movement of care and love for the planet, and just getting on with doing it. And the more that we nourish the place that we're on, the more that we kind of feed it, it deepens its roots, and those roots connect with the roots of other plants. And if we think of it from a mycelial network, every now and then we'll get these little sort of flowerings. There'll be this mushroom that pops up and we see it. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. And if we keep tending to the soil and keep composting the soil, we'll help this mycelial network to grow and to spread. And, when you see those mushrooms come up and they spore, then there's like billions of spores that go out and land, and if the soil is fertile. So by staying connected, even if it's conversations online that talk about how we think about being in relationship with the world differently, it's not to be involved in permaculture. Yes, you could grow a garden, but it could be about how you tend your relationship to your community, to your farmers, and to your local economy. There are so many different ways to enter into being or living a permaculture way of life. And I think one of the greatest misconceptions is that you have to have a big backyard garden or a farm to be doing permaculture. Permaculture is in your mind. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of being in the world. It's a way of showing up, a way of connecting, a way of observing and noticing what's happening, and really understanding that we are nature, and that everything that we do, if we do it from that perspective and of caring for all life, then we're in relationship with a permacultural way of being. And I think if we shift that and surround ourselves with people who are having conversations in all those multiple dimensions, it does fill our cup. It does feel like, yes, this movement is a global movement. It's one of the largest global movement that exists, in terms of this positive, practical, possible, we're possibilitarians. We see what's possible. And and I've spent a lot of time speaking with people, and particularly during the lockdowns and since, saying these global conversations we're having is what kept me going. To be able to touch base with other people who care, to share ideas, and to just feel that little bit of insert of being uplifted. So we go and we get involved in our local projects or our local garden or our local balcony action or our local community action. And then we connect globally and we feel like, oh yes, it's not just me doing my little bit. It's us doing all of this together. And this is making a positive difference. And I am part of something much larger and of a world that cares. And I think this love and care and tending, like it feels very soft, but it's actually incredibly powerful.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. And I love the fact that you've touched on the fact that it starts within the mind and the mindset and within. And soil lovers, we're going to go deeper on that topic just after the break. Stick with us. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Morag Gamble from the Permaculture Education Institute. And we've been talking about all things permaculture. But one thing that really stood out to me, and I'm a big believer of it, is that it is all about mindset and the way that you view the world. And it doesn't matter if you've got access to land or garden or backyard or not, maybe it's a balcony. Can you go a little bit deeper in the whole mindset things? Like what are some of the principles that we can kind of have like that kind of shift in our thinking? I always kind of call it as like putting the lens or the glasses on, like you see the world a bit differently when you have that kind of shift internally. And a regenerative human or a permaculture human then sees the world through that regenerative lens. So what are some of the things that people can maybe start doing or thinking about internally to view the world a bit more, as a permaculturalist?
Well, the first one is to really understand that we are nature. It's not like humans and the environment. We're not separate from the environment. We are beautifully interwoven with the whole of life. Another one is that the landscape, that nature is everywhere as well, that it's within us, it's around us, and whatever context you find yourself in, next time you go for a walk down the street, just sort of pop on that lens of that nature lens and see what you notice. I think one of the key things that permaculture and a permaculture way of thinking really helps us to touch base with is our observation skills, our noticing skills. An example of this is my daughter just started going to university in Canberra. And so I took her down there. This was early last year, and I took her down there to get her settled in. And as we're walking through campus, we're noticing all these things like, oh, look, there's some rosemary. You could get some of that for when you're cooking up your meal. And we're just going through the campus, noticing all the edible stuff as we just, that's our lens, what's edible. And, oh, there's a native that'll attract the beneficial, blah, blah, blah. That's our banter as we go through places. And then Maya said, as she started to walk through, she made some new friends at university and they're walking through the campus and she started chatting about these plants and what they could do. And she said, people looked at her and said, well, how do you know that stuff? It's like, what? And she said, well, how do you not know that stuff, was her thought, because she'd grown up. Yeah. It's just a normal way of being. And it's this sense that most of us go through our daily life with the plant world and the environment, our habitat, as just background. We need to foreground that and feel part of it and appreciate. Like when you walk past a dandelion bursting through a piece of concrete, like, wow, aren't you amazing? Like this gratitude of like acknowledging the other species, the more than human species. We often think about the more than human relationships with, there's great experiences you have with a whale or with a dolphin or with a megafauna of some sort. Whereas these daily relationships that you have with all life around you, like the purslane that bursts out of the most incredibly harsh landscapes, and appreciating that. So it's a being in a state of appreciation and noticing and observation. Another thing is really looking at how we can come back to understanding our bioregion and our local place. Like what is our place? What's our habitat? And understanding how it works and how we can be an active contributor to that. It could be, being part of a tree planting up the catchment, or it could be part of tending to, the waterways, or tending to the local economy or to the local community. Just being really present and being willing to step up and show up in different ways. For me, that's what it kind of feels like, and being in a state of noticing and being available to tend to that.
No, I agree. The observing and being connected to the nature. And I think, you know, in a world where there's all these beeps and buzzers and notifications and things drawing us to gadgets and gizmos and tasks and to-do lists, we need to actively think about how do we slow down and be more present. And it's interesting because during COVID, I did a permaculture living kind of course and got a lot more connected to the principles and practices while I was in an apartment on level 21 in South Yarra. And it's very interesting how becoming aware the city sounds became nature sounds. You know, like you started hearing that there are birds and that there are wind noises and there are, you know, the city is breathing and full of nature, but we tend to focus on the ambulance or the fire brigades or the, you know, the noise of the traffic. But all the noises are still there. It's just like what you move your attention to. So that was kind of like one of the things that blew my mind is in like, yeah, like the noises were the same, but my brain, like I said, the filter started hearing different things. And then, you know, all of a sudden you notice the bird that lands on the balcony and it's like the bird was probably always there, but I just didn't see it. You know?
Absolutely. You know? And it is a lens, isn't it? It's a way of seeing, and it's a way of appreciating. And yeah, it's a way of just noticing different things. And if we foreground that and we become in relationship with that, how we make decisions and how we choose to act shifts. So the incredible power that just shift in noticing, that shift in perspective has on us is so powerful. A friend of mine is a systems thinker, Dr. Fritjof Capra, you know, he talks about, you know, there's all these multiple crises in the world, but there's one crisis that connects all of them. That's a crisis of perception. It's how we see ourselves in relationship with the world. And if we can shift that, then everything else changes. And I really do see that that's very much at the heart of what permaculture is about.
Yeah, I agree. The movement of the individualism is definitely kind of, you know, this is just to tell a story a little very quickly about even the co-working space that I like work in. It amazes me that, you know, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 people can walk past a plant that's droopy and no one thinks I should water that. You know, I'm just thinking, why me? Like, why is it only me? Like, it's like, can't you hear the plant screaming? Can't you see the signals? Like, you maybe even do this with humans. Do we see people in need on the side of the streets and we blind eye it because we're like, it's not up to me. The government should be doing more. You know, this group should be doing more. And I feel like we've definitely outsourced every single problem in our life. And so people trip over a box on the ground and go, who left that there? Who's going to clean it up? But no one thinks, oh, that could be me, even though they didn't make the mess, you know? And so that responsibility, I think, is a very valid point.
I think this is just going back to where I live at Crystal Waters, I think this is also something that I've learned a lot there, because we look after the roads, we look after the water systems, we look after the energy system, even the internet system is something that we've created because we live in a remote rural environment. They are not going to come and do it. We need to kind of, as a community, think, how can we tend to this? And that noticing has become, so it's turning into that we culture rather than the me culture and the us and them. And my golly gosh, there is no time in the world, well, maybe there were times before, but I think right now, with all the conflicts that are going on in the world, to be able to see ourselves as a we rather than us and them, instead of the blocks and the units, like stop thinking of ourselves as like separate from one another, but intricately woven together, that your future is my future, your well-being is my well-being, the soil well-being is our well-being, you know, our well-being contributes to the soil well-being. You know, we're all interconnected. We are one. There's this planetary unity that exists. And if we can find a way in which to practice that in our daily life, it will ripple out in so many different ways. It will myceliate in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And I'm starting to try and conceptualize how to describe, permaculture through the lens of a peace lens. I think that's what started me off too as a teenager, being incredibly worried. I grew up in the 80s when there was, nuclear threats, and I think that was what's the fear of extinguishing life on this planet, and recognizing my deep love for life was what activated me as a teenager. And then going into forest protection, and then, getting into the activism and finding the fight thing not working. This is gradually, finding ways to actually deeply ground and find peace by being connected, and by connecting and, finding community, finding people who are sharing this idea, and rippling that out as far as we can. I don't know. I'm feeling a little bit today, right now, actually a little bit off kilter, because I've just opened up the news and I've been sent all these messages from friends saying, have you seen, this new, I think it's called the Defender 2024, or saying pretty much, we're in for a big global war. And so I'm thinking, well, what does that mean for us? For everybody, how do we show up with that knowledge? And how do we not just stick our heads in the sand? And, the climate crisis is a real thing. The global economic crisis is a real thing. The global war crises, multiple crises, is a real thing. And the refugee crisis is a very real thing. But I think when we care, when we show up, when we care, and it starts in our garden, it starts in our balconies, it starts wherever we are, it starts with our relationship with our neighbours, with our community, and it can only go from there. Like, we can't take on the world, but we can show up in our daily life in a way that puts out a kind of set of relationships that we believe are contributing to a peaceful and thriving existence on this planet.
100%. Well said. Thank you so much. I agree. It is those I call them the 1%ers. You think, what's that going to change? And again, not to go back to COVID, but that really was a time where I paused and I stopped the busyness and I got to reflect. I did a program called Activated Human. One of my mates in Queensland, Josh Holiday, runs it. And that was by far one of the best programs I've ever done, because it got me to be, I call it like a conscious citizen or a conscious consumer. I kind of reframed things of going, climate crisis, war on this, war on that. They're all external, but maybe we need to start, stop pointing the finger out, point the finger in, and go, maybe we have a citizen disconnect crisis. And I then started making small decisions. Like, I moved my money out of the traditional banking system, put some into crypto, put some into Bank Australia, because they don't lend to fossil fuel. And I thought, well, if I've got dollars in the bank and I know that banks can go and lend 10 times my money to other people, well, if I'm going to have a 10x multiplier on my money, I want it to be with companies doing good. So I closed all my old NAB accounts and moved it all to Bank Australia, one small 1%er. I moved my super. If my super is going to sit somewhere where governments get to play with my money and do whatever they want to move their agendas, whether it be war and other stuff, and invest in mines and, demolish Indigenous sites to accidentally miscalculate something, hell no, you're not doing that with my money. So I moved my money to future supers. Those little active decisions where you think you're hopeless and you're out of control, and even during the whole pandemic thing, I was like, if we all just went to the bank and took $1,000 out, we would send a massive ripple effect to the system, quote unquote, because they need our money more than what we need it. And the fact that people don't know that our money is lendable 10 to 8 times every time we put something in. You take $1,000 out of your bank's account and put it under your mattress, you've now stopped 8,000 to 9,000, call it $10,000 of circulating money that other people can be doing bad things with. And so I went angry, and then I went, no. Now we got to go more positive, and it's like, how do we do the right thing? How do I know that, and that, I've been a mouthpiece to that, permaculture living and all that kind of stuff. Like, how do I be a better human today than what it was yesterday? How do we make soil better today than what it was yesterday? And that's kind of, the vision that I live in and the filter that I live in is, how do we just be that 1% better? And yes, sometimes you'd crave in a coffee and you buy a coffee cup and it's not recyclable. That's okay. You don't have to demonize yourself and be hard and, be hard, because that's what the system wants you to do, is like fear and hate yourself. So we need to be raise above that and go, we do live in a world where sometimes we need to drive a car and it's got petrol or diesel in it. Like, this is the world we live in. We can't go under a rock and retreat, because then you're not being that activist or that enthusiast to change the world 1% at a time, or a very small amount of percent at a time. So yeah, voting with your actions and living that as a truth, and knowing that what you do does matter, even if it is behind the scenes and you're just moving your money to a more conscious banking system,
so
those little
powerful.
things matter.
Yeah.
And I think people don't know how powerful they are with those little kind of actions. Like, super is one of the things that annoys me the most. It's like, you've got my money until I'm 55 or 60, and yet you can go and do whatever you want with it without any consultation. It's literally, that's a lot of power. You think about all the money that they've got under management. They can literally move needles around as they need, and with no guarantee that you will ever get a return. Like, we could drop this share market by 70%, and all of a sudden 70% of everyone's super money goes out of circulation. Like, how? Why?
That's right. I think we've come from the generation before is this sense that, that is security. And we have a very false sense of what security is, or a very warped sense of what security is. Security is in community. Security is in thriving soil. Security is in biodiversity. That's what real security is about. And I think we've sort of sidestepped that to have it defined as money in the bank, which isn't, as you just said, secure. Or growing GDP is security, whereas that's undermining the basis of what gives us real life security. And those narratives, I think it's really important to just point at them, not to say you have to do this or you have to do that, but just to point at them so that we start to think slightly differently about how that might happen, and to begin our own investigations about what that change might look like in our own household, because you can't offer directives, can you? Because every situation is different. It's like you can't set out a cookie cutter plan for what a permaculture garden might look like in everyone's backyard, because everyone's household's different, the winds are different, the soil is different, the climate's different, all those things. So it's about pointing to the principles and pointing to, I actually think it's probably about asking good questions, showing up with a curiosity and a wonder, and this framework of thinking about, the ethical framework. Is this about caring for the earth? Is this about caring for people? Is it about caring for all life? And, just having enough to feel safe and happy and secure, and that other people are also going to be able to live safe and happy and secure, safe lives. Yeah.
Strong word, curiosity. I think that's been my kind of North Star for a very long time. Just being curious on how things work. My parents always tell me stories about how family stopped buying me toys because I would get a new toy and I would break it because I want to see how the motor works and how's that thing lighting up. And I was very curious. And now kind of my little catchphrase is unqualified and curious, because people often go, well, what's your qualification? Nothing. I'm just trying to be a good person and learn the systems myself. And I love being a generalist that learns everything, because I don't want to be qualified in one little field and put the blinkers on, And so now I'm like unqualified and curious is kind of my little response to that. And it gets well received. Because, I'm not a soil scientist, and nor do I want to be, I do like sitting on that fringe of curiosity and, the many parts that make up the whole, so that's great. Are you ready to become the voice of the soil?
Oh, I would love to become the voice of the soil.
Excellent. Well, you have become the soil. You've embodied its energy, and you're connected to the mycelium network that is connecting throughout the whole planet. And you are the mouthpiece of the soil. What will you say to all the soil lovers listening and to the 8 billion people on the planet?
Keep me alive. Let the plants keep flourishing. Don't leave me bare. I thrive when there's lifing in me. So let the plants thrive, be it what you call a weed or anything else, but don't leave me bare.
Let the life inside me life. I love that. Let it keep growing. And the fact that it is a living organism is what blew my mind, 6-7 years ago when I first watched my video of the soil under a microscope and was like, this is alive. What are we doing? And that's what started my curiosity down that rabbit hole, is that it is a living organism.
I'm away from my garden at the moment. I have been for maybe 3 months or so, and I knew that. So instead of making it fallow, the garden, just taking everything out so that it'll be ready when I come back, just allowing the garden to be fully alive. And then the soil will be happy when I get back because it's still living. It's not just dormant and waiting. Soil doesn't go dormant and waiting like that. It is always just waiting for that moment to come alive more. So, yeah, let the life.
Yes, love that. And so before we wrap up the show, is there one thing that you'd like to just transfer into the minds of everyone on the planet? If there was one thing that you've picked up along your journey and you wish that we could just, matrix download it into everyone, what would that be?
It's going to sound really corny.
Okay, we like that.
to smile when you notice something beautiful that you just walk past. It could be a person, it could be a butterfly, and when you smile, it shifts something in yourself, it shifts something in the receiver, and it brings forth a different way of showing up.
Yeah. And even the observer as well, people observing other people smiling. One of the things I always talk about is like, when a proposal happens in public, it's all the people who are observing who end up being like the ones taking out the camera and taking photos and being smiling and happy to complete strangers. Like, it makes no sense to some degree, but it's the observer that sometimes the biggest gift happens to, not the giver or the receiver, So
just on that, I was at Trevi Fountain not that long ago, and someone proposed, and the whole place went off. Oh my gosh, there was hundreds, maybe 1,000 people who were all just cheering and hugging and celebrating because they witnessed a beautiful moment. And so if you're a witness to something and you share it even with a gentle smile, it does ripple out. Yeah, beautiful.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. How can people hang out more with you, Morag?
Come and find me at permacultureeducationinstitute.org. All of the different things that I've got going on, you can find there, from the podcast to the YouTube. There's free masterclasses that happen every month. There's free permaculture film clubs that happen every month. And I have a whole lot of online permaculture courses. And even though they're online, I'm in there every week with you doing a whole lot of things. So yeah, come and hang out with me. I'd love that.
Excellent. Very much recommend doing that. Thank you so much for everything that you have done and keep doing, and love your energy and your smile. And thanks for showing up today. Even with some of the internet glitches that we had, we'll stitch this all together and make sure it's a perfect episode to keep your impact and your work moving through the ears of the soil lovers. So thank you so much for showing up today.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for all that you do, Ray.
Excellent. There you go, soil lovers. That's another episode for you to sink your teeth into and get your ears listening to. And remember, whatever you're doing today, do it with a smile. Share that for all the observers that might be seeing you. Notice all the little things beneath your feet, the plant that might be growing through the concrete, the dandelion, research what it's all about. And maybe this episode has piqued your interest to go deeper into the permaculture world, hang out with Morag on all the plethora of information that she has online. So on that note, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into the wonderful world of soil, and do it with a smile. Till next time, I'm Regen Ray. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.